So thumbs. We're going to talk about thumbs today on the show. Jose Ramirez, we finally got the detail. See, I broke my own thumb. That's why the one doesn't bend. We're going to get into thumbs. We're going to talk about 24 hours later. We're going to talk about some newsworthy players on today's Locked On Guardians.
You are Locked On Guardians, your daily podcast on the Cleveland Guardians, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Locked On Guardians. I want to thank you for making Locked On Guardians your first listen today and every day, wherever it is you get podcasts. As you can see, we have a few technical difficulties. Justin is here. He's not turned into a robot or a screen. He's just, his camera's not functioning as well. So we're doing it this way. Still better to have him adding his great content than just me solo. So for those who don't know me, I'm Jeff Ellis, the host of Locked On Guardians. I guess I should move up a little so you can see the wearing the gear. Before this, I was a lead draft and prospect analyst at Scout 24/7. And before that, I wrote for many a Cleveland sports blog. Justin, tell them about your bona fides.
I am Justin Latta. Yes, if you're watching on YouTube, you can't see me, but I always had a face for radio anyway, so this works out perfectly. I've been at every Cleveland sports blog as well, ESPN, Sweet Spot, Fansided, Burning River Baseball. I now manage Guardians Baseball Insider, formerly Indians Baseball Insider, formerly Indians Prospect Insider, where Jeff was. And I also freelance at the Willoughby News Herald and the Rain Morning Journal, covering Cleveland baseball prospects.
Today's show, as I said, we're gonna get into some thumbs. If you missed the news, we'll just do this briefly. We're gonna talk about more in segment 2. We call it tease. Jose Ramirez's thumb never got better. Long story short, we were like, "What's wrong with Jose?" You heard me on the show be like, "This, did his swing get messed up?" Turns out he tore a ligament in his thumb. The fact that, he played as well as he did with a torn ligament is kind of amazing, but it explains a lot of things. We're going to say everything else about that for segment 2. Make sure to tune in. We're going to talk about the Jess Winker situation as well, just to continue doing some teases. And, but for now, 24 hours later, we thought, okay, what do we want to say? How do we feel after 24 hours? What is kind of our stance? And Justin and I were discussing before the show, and I think, a big surprise, very similar views, where this team is in a great position, but, looking at a lot of guys, one of the big things that stands out more than looking at anyone else's health. And, I talked about it throughout the season. You heard me say a dozen times, last year, 2021, they were a team that got beat up and lost starters for a significant amount of time. I mean, this year they had, yes, Jose was hurt half the season, more than half the season, but he still played through it. But for the most part, they were extremely healthy. That's probably not going to hold as well next year. Can they roll it back? There's other factors as well. I don't want to take all of Justin's thunder here, but I think that health factor is the first thing that comes to mind if you want to look at a negative. The positive, I still feel good. I still feel like the year started, I thought Ahmed Rosario would probably be gone by midseason because he's on the last year of his deal. Jose Ramirez, I thought, if he doesn't get re-signed, he was going to get traded. And then you had Franmil Reyes and then question marks. So I still feel really good about where this team is set up, where it's going, and the overall talent from, the rookie ball all the way up to the main roster. Justin, what are your kind of thoughts, feelings?
Yeah, 100%. Things are going in the right direction. You feel good about the roster from the major leagues down to about AA, high A-ish. We'll see low A. I mean, I like the 2022 draft. We'll see how that all plays out. But, I mean, they're a very healthy organization talent-wise right now, especially given the youth of the major league roster and then the prospects they have down below. And if you really want to believe they have financial flexibility, they've had financial flexibility for a long time, and it's never mattered. So that's neither here nor there as far as payroll is concerned. We'll see what they do with that. But there are many opportunities to improve it, different avenues they can take. And it's just about executing and finding trade partners for some of these prospects to improve the team. They've just got to make some hard decisions on who they think is a piece of the core and who's a guy they think they can upgrade from. And, okay, we'd like this guy had a great season, but we feel like we can get better this way. We have to do it. Will they make the decision? I don't know. And like you said, they were very healthy. Maybe that has to do with the youth of the roster. Like, younger players maybe without a track record of being hurt is a good thing because, the best predictor of injury is future injury is previous injury, right? So thank goodness that didn't happen to Shane Bieber in 2022, but maybe having a young roster without the mileage is part of that. We'll see. And, we always talk about how prospect development is not linear. Prospects develop on their own time when things happen naturally, and the work they put in and just how things flow. And the same kind of goes for team building and the roster is, just because Oscar Gonzalez had this great rookie year, I'm not picking on Oscar Gonzalez. I'm just, making an example. Doesn't mean he's got to come out next year and be better and hit 30 home runs and, whatever. Andres Gimenez could see some regression. There's no guarantee that Trevor Stephan gets even better next year. I mean, hard to be better, but that's my point is player development's not linear, and that includes young players. You can't just say that, okay, we're going to run it back with the same roster and we're going to win 95 games and we're going to go to the playoffs again and give it another shot. Like, that's great and all. Maybe they have the talent to do it, but it's never a guarantee that things are going to play out the same way twice. It's hard to get back. That's why I said yesterday. That's why I wasn't going to emotionally invest too much because, this season was about growing and learning, and it turned into a winning season. And boy, when you get to the playoffs and you get close to winning series like that, it just becomes so hard to get back and you just want to win when you're there. So that's why I think yesterday was so disappointing, but still a lot of potential ahead. A lot of reason for optimism.
Yeah, just in terms of like something very basic like BABIP, we know BABIP it shows a degree of luck. It's like Jimenez had a 371. No one has that. That's unsustainable. Oscar Gonzalez a 345. Yeah, that's not going to work. Med Rosario at 326. That's actually kind of in line with him. Faster guys can be a little higher. Stephen Kwan at 323. That could be sustainable. But yeah, Oscar, I think it's just, when you look at the stats and you just kind of know the players and you know how things typically work, Jimenez and Gonzalez in that offense are the two who feel most likely to have some regression to mean. Do you think that's a fair or an unfair statement?
I mean, it could be any. I mean, you talk about average on balls in play, like that's all dictated by players' exit velocity, and everyone's going to get mad for using analytics, but in launch angle, it's about optimally hitting the ball, and that's the way the player ends up making their own balls on play luck. And also the reduction of the shift, I wonder how that's going to impact things too. That will change some things either. Yeah,
that's going to be, I went through the Saros piece talking about like who will benefit the most, like who rule changes will benefit the most. And Cleveland didn't have too many players represented in that. It was more like who it would hurt because the Guardians have a very deliberate pitching staff and they're not always the quickest to the plate. I think
into that.
It's like, and looking at this team, we're not sitting here and being like Grumpy Gus is the day after or anything like that. It's just, it's important to realize, I mean, listen, Jose Ramirez and Andres Gimenez were this team's two best players this year. They follow a very similar career where they both popped in their first year and then struggled in year two, spent significant amount of time in the minors and then found it out in year three, and both look like potential stars right now. But I'm just saving that because it could happen to anyone. Like even, Stephen Kwan feels kind of bust proof just because of, I'm not entirely convinced he's not a Cylon, but anyone it can happen to. We've seen a lot of guys. Its development is not a straight line, as you said. And I just think it's always important to keep that in mind. The one thing that I will say that is the nice side of this is, man, the depth in the system is just going to be kind of the great catch-all, because this isn't a situation where, like, remember when Francisco Lindor was hurt and Jose Ramirez was beat up and we had Max Morhoff and Eric Stamets? And listen, Eric Stamets has had a few more opportunities with other teams. He's a great defender. There's some Johnny McDonald to that profile, but like, I mean, that was that was born of desperation and having no other options. Like, we had just let Ernie Clement go. Ernie Clement was a better prospect than Eric Stamets. Like, it's a much nicer situation than even when this team was last in the postseason. And they promoted guys, but it's not like they really outside of the Miller trade. The Lucroy trade came back. It was always minor stuff on the fringes. It's not like they ever were willing to knock their system out or really go and trade away every piece. They kept some players, they kept some pieces. So this is this nice situation where, I mean, even if they go out and make an all-in move, they still will be fine. The depth is still ridiculous. So it'll be okay. Any final thoughts before we take our first break, swing into segment 2, and come back and talk about Jose and his thumb?
Well, you're just talking about guys who are beat up. 2019, I remember going to a series at the Nationals where their lineup included Ryan Flaherty and Adam Rosales and Andrew Velasquez and Mike Freeman. And that was just gross. I never want to see that again. Just saying.
I mean,
things are much better since then. And 2019 wasn't a horrible year, which is funny.
And at the same time of it, it's like the Angels started Andrew Velasquez for a lot of games this year. Like, a lot of games this year. And that's a team that has a huge payroll, goes out and signs massive free agents, but doesn't develop, has almost nothing in system, and is just a complete train wreck. So it's, you can see what happens when you don't have depth, which is, what this team has in spades. Let's go ahead and take that break. Like I said, we'll come back, talk Jose, talk some injuries, get into the Jess Winker situation is just crazy if you have not gotten into it. So make sure you come back to hear all about that on today's show. But our sponsor, one of the fantastic people that help keep these lights on, should I do a thank you? You're keeping the lights on, not off. Our Roan. It's one of the brand new sponsors. We love brand new sponsors. Roan makes a nice, well-made shirt. They are all about quality. You are getting a shirt that should last for a long time. It is, it's meant to breathe. It's meant to be flexible. It's kind of almost like when you read the stuff and you go and you look, it's like a fancy second skin. It's something on you that's going to feel it's going to feel good. It has anti-stink technology, or anti-odor as they call it. So it's flexible, it has stretch, and it comes right back, giving you that extra mobility you might need. There's so many great things about this shirt. It's the shirt of tomorrow. Now, if you want to buy the shirt of tomorrow today, well, you want to head to Roan. That's Roan, RHONE. The commuter shirt can get you through a workday and straight into whatever comes next. Head to roan.com/locked-on and use the promo code locked on to save 20% off your entire order. That's 20% off your entire order when you head to RHONE.com/locked-on. Use code locked on. It's time to find your corner office comfort. And again, it's the shirt of tomorrow, so make sure you order it today. So, I talked about this. I've shown my thumbs. If you're not on YouTube, you're not seeing me. I can't bend my my left thumb because I broke it playing third base. And then I took the cast off myself with a hammer and screwdriver because, it was the 90s and I was 13. It was difficult to do, but yeah, I successfully got through a good old not plaster cast, whatever that wrap and junk was. But thumbs, I can speak from personal experience. When your thumb is broken, just about anything you do feels like someone is taking a hammer to that thumb. And Jose Ramirez, we got the official announcement today that he tore a ligament in his thumb. Not just that it was broken, he tore ligaments in his thumb, and he's going to have surgery on it, and then it's going to take 6 to 8 weeks to recover. First question to you, Justin. Should he have just gotten this done in the season so he would have been... Because that's the thing. You go back... If Jose had kept doing what he was doing until that thumb injury, it would have been a 3-horse race for the MVP. At that point in time, it was Judge and Ramirez were your top 2 MVP candidates. He was having his career year. Then the thumb injury happens, and he finished the year. So I pulled up the numbers. For the people who hate numbers, I'm sorry. Going back to that injury, he had a 107 runs created plus from that point on, which is above league average. That is very good. A 264 average, 225 on base, 438 slugging. He was a good hitter. he was no longer transcendent. Ahmed Rosario had a higher one during that time, as did Josh Naylor, as did Quan, as did Jimenez. Should he have just missed 2 months? Could this team have recovered? I mean, it says he was worth 2.2 WAR the rest of the year, and they won by more than 2 games in the division. Could they have still won the division? Would it have been good to give those extra reps to a young player this year? What are your thoughts? And then I will come back around and give mine.
I mean, let's see. That was June. It was mid-June. We're talking, let's see, 6 to 8 weeks recovery. Probably had to go on a rehab stint. So we're talking what? That's July, all of July, half
so September,
of June.
Maybe.
Yeah, he's come back end of August at the best.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I'm going to say that no chance Cleveland makes the playoffs without him. Even you're at that point, you're probably turning to Gabe Arias or Tyler Freeman, and Tyler Freeman didn't really get a shot until later in the year. I think he was just coming back from injury on his own. You could say Nolan Jones, but that would be a mess considering he was just coming back at that point too from his own injury, and he was trying to get things right at Columbus, and they were talking about moving him to the outfield anyway. So I think Arias was your only option. I think, and even Arias had some injuries this year. He got hit by a pitch a couple times, and he missed time with a broken finger or something. So I don't know. I'm not really sure what the alternative was. I guess the alternative was like Owen Miller, or because I'm trying to think of what point Arias was there. But yeah, no, I'm going to say even at a 107 weighted runs created plus, 2 wins, which is what league average. League average is 2 wins, right, for the whole season.
I mean, for a whole season. So this is like a partial. I mean, he was going to be on pace to be more like a 3-win player with his injury, which is above league average.
Yeah, I'm still taking that. And just for what he means in the clubhouse defensively and running the bases. Yeah, I'm still taking. And he still walked 8% of the time. He chased a little bit more. I think he had some weird mechanics with his to compensate for the thumb issue. Man, he had a 10% infield fly rate after that, and before that it was about 10%. So I guess
he led the league in pop-ups this year. Now we know for a reason.
Yeah, I would think that would be is directly tied to the injury, I would say. So no, I would still say that thank goodness he was able to play through that injury, because I don't think they get to where they are without him playing through that injury.
It's hard to say, because it's the whole idea of like, yeah, they won by much more in 2.5 games. They won this division going away, but without having Jose as an anchor, are they able to do? I mean, statistically, it says yes. Statistically, it says that this is a team that could get there without him, because there was enough other pieces to toe the line. Yeah, Arias missed most of July with that injury. Like you said, Jones was, kind of moved around to other positions. I think that's the one reason you're like, for all of their depth at that time, Freeman had issues in the offseason. Just like you said, they didn't have a great internal option. If they had someone that made a ton of sense, then maybe it would make more. You're right. It probably turns into Owen Miller. And then what's interesting is, I guess if it's Owen Miller there, it's like, who becomes the DH option? Like, who do they call up? Is that guy? Is it Nolan Jones? Does he stay up here longer? But then, Owen Miller's role was, he was close to an everyday player for a good chunk of the year. But they would want a right-handed bat, and they really didn't have that. Maybe, okay, if you want to go full tinfoil, maybe if he had been hurt and missed time, it would have forced the Guardians' hands, and maybe they do go out and make that trade for someone like Brandon Drury, who could step in and play some third as he's played. I know he played mostly second base this year, I want to say, but he has played third. It's like, maybe they go out and make that trade that they don't make because they have to. And then they have the advantage of having that player afterwards. So if they're like kind of competing, maybe it forces their hands to get better. Like I said, Brandon Drury, you and I discussed off air, it's like he would have been an ideal fit for this team. He still would be if they can get him at a decent price in free agency. He would have been second on this team in home runs. He had a great year, and there was, I know, interest in him, but I'm going to say Jose should have had the surgery. I'm going to go against you just so we can disagree on something. It gives him, a month to kind of get right. And, when he broke his hamate, he recovered pretty quickly. Maybe he's actually like back in Cleveland by the end of August. It gives him like a month and a half. And if he is closer to like the Jose he was for the first 2 months, they get past the Yankees in the postseason. And if they go on, and if they go on, and they add a player because now they have to, they can't sit on their laurels at the deadline. You put Brandon Drury on this team again. I'm going to throw him out there because he did get traded. He's an ideal fit and he could play third base. And he's someone they could have acquired. You add Drury, you add Jose at 100%. They get past the Yankees in the postseason. Now the question is, do they make it? If they don't, that's essentially what it comes down to. So I'm going to play the long game here and say he should have just had the surgery. He tends to be one of those guys who bounces back so quickly. He works so hard that he would be back. He'd be old Jose by mid-September. Postseason comes. They still make the postseason because they want it going away. And then you have a better lineup and you have a legitimate MVP type of guy in the middle of your lineup. They get past the Yankees, and right now they're playing in the postseason, and it isn't Harrison Bader hitting another while they're losing another flipping home run. He's on like dinosaur steroids right now. I'm saying dinosaur steroids, so no one's like, oh, it's obviously a joke, but he is in the zone. He is Steve Avery, Mark Lemke, whoever you want to talk about. He is that zone. But yeah, that's why I kind of go like, just have the surgery.
Yeah, no, I could see that for sure. I'm not sure they make it, but you're right. It gives you a chance in the postseason. If you could have said that would make them more aggressive to go out and find somebody that fits there if he's out for a while. I do remember that him coming back from the hamate issue, and he had a was it a 3-run shot or a grand slam in his first at bat? I can't remember, but he had 2 home runs.
Supposed to zap power. That's the crazy thing. Like what I remember about the hamate, and we'll talk Sean Murphy eventually, but it's like he had a hamate injury his junior year, and it affected his. It's so, Chris Shaw, future first round pick of the Giants, who hasn't worked out, but it's like it steals your power, and then Jose comes back and just goes on a tear. It was humorous because it just never happens that way.
Yeah, he didn't finish the year, by the way. I mean, he couldn't play in that final series at Washington because the wrist just was not good. He sat out for some time, and I saw some people saying like, "Oh, why didn't Jose? If he didn't have the surgery in June or July, why didn't they rest him more after the clinched the playoffs?" And I'm just going to say, if it's there's no amount of rest that's going to repair a torn UCL. No. Like he could have
nothing fixes your ligament.
Right. So resting him makes no sense. If anything, maybe it combats some soreness, but if anything, I think he needed the playing time to try to figure out his swing and try to how he can, because obviously he was compensating. We noticed that with the pop-ups and everything else, the top hand was flying off when he was hitting right-handed. He was swinging basically with what looked like one hand at times. I think he might have even needed that time to play to try to see how he could manipulate his swing to be better and make it work in the postseason instead of sit and then go in not being sure of himself. So
I'm sure
there was no amount of rest that was going to fix it.
Yes, nothing was going to fix it. I'm sure he was cortisone shot to all heck. Just from having, again, experience with some massive injuries. He was probably on all of the good stuff. But yeah, it took Jose from, again, he was in the process of a career year to closer to average. And yeah, maybe it does give them some incentivization. And that's why I'm kind of like, get the surgery. And who knows? Like I said, maybe it would have ended up being the best thing for him, but for all sides. But I also feel like Jose probably didn't want that. Jose wanted to play. So I think that also came to be a big part of it as well.
Right.
And, I know everyone loves him in that clubhouse, and there's nothing that says that as one is recovering, he couldn't have been with the team. Like, I don't think there's a rule that like an injured guy has to be away unless I'm missing.
No, Anthony Goes traveled in the playoff with them. Yeah.
So no, I think he could have still been there. He could have still been part of it. I think it would have been hard for him to not play. But yeah, let's take our break. Actually, unless you got anything more you want to throw in
on Jose. No, but I will say it feels better. Actually, in a way, it feels better knowing that there was an injury because
yes,
the alternative is he struggled in the second half. And they say, well, he's 100% healthy. No, he's fine. Like, then you're like, oh, okay. Then
as he hits age 30 and, always had kind of a non-traditional build, like
you start to be
know.
like, all right, well, let's hope next year things turn around. So now you're like, okay, it was an injury. He was 188 WRC plus in 60 games before the injury. Just an absurd pace. 16 homers, 11 steals. Yeah, I feel a little bit better in retrospect, knowing going into 2023 that the thumb's going to be just fine and the hand's going to be just fine, and he's not regressing.
Honestly, it was a breath of relief for me. I was like, okay, like I saw that and I thought, like, I viewed it as good news. I viewed it as, hey, we know now, like, we know what happened.
Mm-hmm.
There's a reason, and that he'll turn back into, league superstar Jose Ramirez, hopefully from here on out. We're going to take that break, come back and get into so many people wanted the Guardians' dad, Jess Winker. He was maybe the name I heard the most, and it has been an eventful 48 hours involving Jess Winker. So we're going to get into that on today's episode of Locked On Guardians. And we're back. So, Justin, do you want to tell people about the Jess Winker situation of it all?
Yeah, it's still kind of vague, to be honest, but one of the Seattle beat reporters, the Mariners beat reporters, went on a radio station and basically said teammates were kind of fed up with him at the end of the year, and there were some coaches and some other people in the organization that were kind of fed up with what was going on. They didn't really get into detail about what it was, but it just kind of sounded like he wasn't putting in the work to, like, he was mostly a DH for them for a lot this year because he couldn't play the field. He wasn't good. He didn't put in the work to improve. And it sounded like when he got hurt, there was some issues about, like, rehabbing, and he wasn't putting the same amount of work and preparation that other players were. And I guess other players noticed, and the team noticed, and Scott Service didn't make the comments about him, but they seemed like they were targeting him about how we're going to come in, how we're going to work, and what it means to be a Mariner and all this kind of stuff. And if you don't do it, we're going to find guys that do it. And it was all very weird. But that radio interview in Seattle, the beat reporter going on and saying the team was kind of fed up with his act, almost reminded me a little bit of Nick Swisher in a way. I'm not saying Nick Swisher didn't work hard, but there were, he had the weird attitude thing, and some people just didn't like the shtick by the end, and he wasn't playing well, so it all didn't work out. So, yeah, I don't know. But he was not a good defender in Cincinnati, so we knew the outfield was a problem for him. He was really a DH anyway.
Yeah, so I have a fun Nick Swisher story this reminded me of. I don't know if I've ever told on this podcast before. When he was, for the shtick got tiresome for a lot of people, but I don't think it was as much a shtick for him as just him. And I always remember we were sitting down there, and he was always the nicest guy. Always, like, most major leaguers hate to have to talk to media down there. I just remember us going down there and, like, hey, did you hear about I always get the names reversed, the David Murphy deal, and just his sadness at his teammate. Like, he didn't even try to hide it. He was just, you could tell, oh, really? But yeah, I'll say that for as much as people out there, I still see some hate for him. Like, he just was himself. So I'm going to throw that out there. And a lot of guys are not kind to AA minor league media. So, and he was always very upbeat. But yeah, that's my funny Nick Swisher. It's just him like, oh, sad face. But part of being a teammate. So Winker, the other thing was, like, apparently he, like, didn't want to play in any double headers. He just didn't think that that's something you should have to do. He didn't show up to, like, all the, like, practices and weight training. He was skipping out on team events.
The doubleheaders thing would not have worked well in Cleveland with their rainoff this year. That would have been a disaster.
No, yeah, he apparently was like, I can't play in 2 games of a doubleheader. He was a little prima donna, and the crazy thing. Well, there's 2 crazy things. One, if Jess Winker had come up in the Cleveland organization, I think the fans here would have hated him because he can't. He's a platoon bat, and he can't play any defense. Like, he is. He's absolutely awesome against righties, right? Because he's a left-hand bat, but he can't. I mean, you need to bench him against lefties. He is not just a little bad. He is awful. I mean, he is really, really bad. He's a platoon DH. So I always thought it was interesting how much people loved him. I get it. He always did well in the traditional counting stats. The interesting thing is, I mean, he is clearly beat up. It was reported by the Mariners today. It's also interesting that like they let out all this negativity slip like the day before it gets announced that, yeah, so yesterday that all came out. Today it gets announced that he's having neck surgery. And then once he recovers from that, he's having knee surgery. So they really buried this guy before he has to go and have back-to-back surgeries. So there might have been a reason why he didn't want to play in doubleheaders. He might have been trying to play through things just like Jose was. But, you know, if anyone's curious, we went and looked it up. When he came over, he signed a 2-year contract. So Seattle, I mean, they can trade him, but they can't designate him for assignment. He's not arbitration eligible. He has guaranteed money. And then to me, the other funny thing with all of this is like the Reds were so desperate to cut salary, so desperate to keep getting cheaper and cheaper that they essentially the big trade piece for them was getting rid of Eugenio Suarez in this deal. Williamson is a solid pitching prospect, but I don't even know if he's amongst their top 10 prospects in Cincinnati. Have to go check that. It was about cutting money, and then Suarez turned back into the guy he was before 2020 and was the real key. It was almost like a complete reverse. Like Winker had a negative WAR this year, and Suarez was amongst the top 15 hitters in multiple categories.
Yep. Suarez, they insisted. I think we heard Cleveland was pretty close to a deal, or they thought they were going to trade for him. And at the last, I don't know at what point in the deal it turned into that the Reds decided they needed to include Suarez's contract. And obviously Cleveland was like, well, we're not doing that because, A, the money, let's be honest, and B, he played third base, and they didn't need a third baseman because they had just I guess at the time they didn't know for sure. I'm trying to think at that point, no, they didn't have Jose signed. They were trying to sign him.
No, they didn't have him signed. No.
So I don't know how that would have played out, but anyway,
because his contract
that would have been a bad sign.
He made, it
was a lot,
$11 million last year. So Suarez was essentially owed $36 million, about $36 million owed over the next 3 years as he goes age 30, 31, 32, and 33 is a team option with a $2 million buyout. And again, I mean, there was a time where I called that one of the best team contracts in baseball, but after 2019, I mean, listen, you throw out 2020 but you come back in 2021 and those 2 years combined, all of a sudden he's struggling to hit 200. And then this year, hey, it's a 236. It's not like back when he was a 260 or higher guy at his peak with Cincinnati, but it's enough because he also hit 31 home runs, which he also hit last year. And, but just moving up the batting average, making better contact was it. And it's interesting to think back because the number of people who want him. And I mean, the other side of it is those 2 awful years, batting average of balls put in play, 214 and 222, well below expectation. For his career, he's at 300, including those 2 years. So he's always had a little bit more batted ball luck because he had some bad batted ball luck. I don't know if Seattle did something to adjust his swing. The Reds have had some interesting analytical history, both good and bad, of who they've hired. So I don't know what was going on with swing mechanics there, but it feels like Seattle helped clean his up and he became such a good hitter. I don't think Cleveland's looking at Jess Winker this offseason. Let me call that a no for anyone who's thinking like, oh, maybe they could buy him on the cheap. No.
He would have blocked Steven Kwan in the first place, so it worked out the way it was supposed to.
100%. Well, do you have any more thoughts? I know people are like, why are you talking about the Seattle guy? He has come up more than any other name over the last 3 years of people asking me about a player who is available or potentially available in trades. So that's why I thought it was worth bringing up. I'm sure it was the same for you, right, Justin?
Yeah, well, I mean, just that and the fact that there was a chance they were going to trade for him. They were in on him at the end of this offseason. He was one of the guys they could have acquired. So bullet dodged, I guess.
Yes. Well, that is Locked On Guardians for this week. this week for today. Sorry, we still got a show tomorrow. We'll sit down, we'll hammer it out. I think we'll start having some fun. We've got some fun plans for this off season. We've already talked about multiple ways we can handle and go with things. We're looking at what has been successful in the past and what are some fun things we can do with a new twist with the co-hosts, and make sure you are checking out daily to see what we're doing here, because it's going to be a fun off season, because it was a fun season and the future looks so bright. If I had shades, I'd put them on right now and just be that corny. I do not.
Maybe I have them on. You just can't tell.
Justin's wearing them. The future's so bright. Justin's wearing shades. So thank you all for watching. Remember, rate and review, download daily, and let's do our YouTube count. Let's see where we are on YouTube. While I do a 30-second vamp, let's see. We are at 776. So that 224. Close. Yeah. So, I mean, we've had a good jump. Don't get me wrong, but help us out. You know, if you got multiple accounts, subscribe on all of them. If you got someone
tell your friends,
who, if your parents don't use their YouTube, but they got a Google, hey, help them subscribe. 224 away. It's a huge thing for us. So please consider helping out the show in that little way.
If me not being on camera is more interesting for you to subscribe, I will do every show like this. If you're watching on YouTube, I don't have a camera today, but if that's more interesting to you, I will keep doing it if it means we get more subscribers.
I'll keep making really bad, terrible jokes. I'll start throwing in the word showcase every show just to annoy Justin. If that
so lucky you can't see my face right now.
I'll make some Will Smith jokes, and we'll have some fun with it. But in all seriousness, as you can tell, we have a lot of fun and a good knowledge base, and it's going to be worth the time. So please subscribe. And how we end every show: go Guardians, go!